Hey world, trying to get better about documenting some stories, and something happened this week that I thought was a good excuse to kind of jump in and start sharing some stories. Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys passed this week. I believe he was 82 years old. And man, I found myself being strangely, incredibly sad. And sometimes you don't realize what people mean to you until they pass away. And you don't realize how profound their passing will be. And that certainly was the case this week when I heard that news. I was with a good friend of mine the day I found out. He's a songwriter. And we talked about it a little bit. And, I realized the Beach Boys, they weren't my generation's music. I'm 52. I was born in December of 72. But their songs were always in the ether. You couldn't turn on the radio when I was a kid and not hear the Beach Boys, right? You had what I thought the first version of the Beach Boys was: Surfin' USA, Surfin' Safari, Little Deuce Coupe. All those, kind of kitschy, fun songs. But this record, Pet Sounds, came out. And, it was a concept record. And I was surprised when I dug into it how many of these songs I actually knew. And, God Only Knows, In My Room, so many great songs. And, the Beach Boys are often referred to as America's Beatles, and for good reason. Whereas the Beatles had two masterful songwriters, the Beach Boys had Brian Wilson. And I'm sure many of you know, but Brian Wilson wrote these songs, arranged them, arranged the harmonies, produced these records, was responsible for the Phil Spector Wall of Sound, having a lot of musicians in the room while recording at once. So I think it was like 96, Capitol Records had remastered Pet Sounds, and I went and bought it. I'd never owned it. And started spending a lot of time listening to it, kind of going to school. Like, what makes this guy so special? And very quickly, I realized why I had kept hearing this America's Beatles, And it's pretty well documented that, the Beatles were listening to Pet Sounds and Sgt. Pepper was kind of their response, which is fascinating. What would have happened had Brian Wilson never made Pet Sounds? I don't think we would have Sgt. Pepper. Certainly not the Sgt. Pepper that we've grown up listening to and loving. So I kind of filed that away and was like, okay, I like the Beach Boys. They're cool. Backing up a little bit. Remember Kokomo? What a great song. I think that came out in the late 80s, right? Just as you think the Beach Boys are dead, David Lee Roth redoes California Girls and hired the Beach Boys and some of the players from the original session because he wanted the version to be so pure. And surprisingly, he did a damn good job. That's a great version. And then Kokomo comes out in the late 80s, right? It's probably one of their best songs that came out later in their career, Those harmonies, again, so amazing. So I've got some notes here. Yeah, September of 2016, I get a call a couple weeks before the show. Brian Wilson was going to be performing Pet Sounds at the Ryman in its entirety, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Pet Sounds. I'm not going to lie, it was a complete bucket list moment for me. So we started prepping for that. I wanted everything to be perfect. I spent more time planning and prepping for this live recording, and it was a video shoot. There was some talk about it being a long form concert film if it was good. There were a couple documentaries being made at the time. So anyway, I show up, and it was a 2-day shoot. So I show up says here the dates were, the first date I think was September 16th and 17th of 2016. So not quite 9 years. So anyway, day one, show up, load in. It's time for sound check. And Brian walks out. And the first thing I noticed, by the way, is there was a recliner on stage. Like, when I say recliner, I mean like your granddad's ragged recliner that your grandma's been wanting him to throw away for 50 years. And he was sitting on stage all day, kind of like as we were setting up. It's like, there's Brian Wilson. He's sitting in a recliner on stage. I'd never seen anything like that. And I found it very interesting, actually, because if you've read much about him, you know how secluded he was. And I thought, oh man, that's really interesting. So we get set up. I'm talking to a video director. And I said, hey, what's the deal with the recliner? And he goes, that's interesting you asked that. He goes, I don't know. But I've been shooting it every day. I've got video and pictures of him at Red Rocks, Hollywood Bowl, now the Ryman. You know, he's sitting in that recliner. And I said, you know, I can't help but wonder, the dressing room's right down the hallway. But it's like, I wonder if it's as simple as this guy was so removed from his career for so long. He famously not leaving his house, you know, not going anywhere. That if now, instead of hiding out in the dressing room, he just wants to be present, perhaps, you know, and see every moment. And it was funny, the director was like, I haven't thought about it that deeply, but I'm going to go with that hook. I like that idea. So anyway, I'm rambling, as I do. Anybody that knows me, very guilty of that. But so we get into rehearsal, right? And typically, for me, a rehearsal is a band running a couple songs. You know, we're getting levels. But this was very different. And I learned, again, the genius, as you hear so much of Brian Wilson, in rehearsal, because before the band even started playing, they started singing, just doing vocals, almost like practicing in sections, which I've seen that done a few times before, but it's not typical. And so they run, like, I think it's like God Only Knows. And they do a course of it, and they stop, and Brian, I think it was like Al Jardine was there, who was in the Beach Boys, a longtime collaborator named, Blondie Chapman. I think I'm getting the name right, might be wrong. But anyway, it's star cast of musicians. And so they run the course, and Brian, very matter of fact, immediately calls somebody out, and he goes, hey, you're on the third. I need less consonants. Don't hit your consonants so hard, and beware of your vowels. And then he pointed to somebody else. He's like, hey, you're on the low octave. I need 30% more volume. And sure enough, he called out all these comments to the singers, and magically, without any of my faders moving, all of a sudden, it sounded freaking incredible. The harmonies were perfect. It's like he was blending, he was mixing the chord, the voices. I had never seen that done before. When I tell the story, it sounds like a very simple thing. I'd never seen this done before. It was incredible. And he kind of orchestrated the band the same way. Very direct ideas about volume, who's playing what part, very minute notes and comments about, you know, what each player should do. And so then all the, you know, the band starts playing. It sounded incredible. And somebody, you know, one of the Ryman staff or something peeked in and was like, oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. And I looked at him and I go, it's Brian Wilson. I've just set levels. He's mixing the band. And it was incredible. And so we got to the show, and it was pretty good. Night one, if you're doing multiple nights, night one, sometimes it's good. It had its moments. And so I show up, I think, around noon on a Saturday for day two. Brian, as I get to the venue, Brian is in the recliner. It's noon, and he's asleep. And, we kind of mill around for a little bit. And, as far as audio goes, I was kind of wearing the hat of the guy in charge that day. And so we kind of wait for like 10 or 15 minutes, and I kind of mill over to the music director. And I'm like, hey, does somebody wake him up? Like, how's this gonna begin? And he goes, oh, he'll wake up. And sure enough, 10 minutes later or so, he woke up, and I was standing there, and I said, you ready to start sound check? He goes, we have music to make. And, it was just great. It was great. I found him to be warm. I'd heard so many stories that he wasn't approachable, and it really wasn't my experience that day. But we got a second show, and it was fantastic. And, it was in his later years. And so, but man, his pitch and everything was still very articulate. It sounded great. I was completely buzzing. My assistant, Matt, was buzzing. It was a career highlight to spend 2 days with him. And so anyway, that's my experience. And I think sometimes when we worked with people, even if it's just for a couple days, in some weird way, you feel like bonded to them. And you feel some sort of connection. And you're blessed when you get to do that, because it's almost like someone's inviting you into their house to kind of take a peek. So anyway, there it is. That's my Brian Wilson story. That was my only interaction with him, but I feel incredibly blessed to have got to do that and to get a look into his world. So anyway, I hope that's interesting. Have a great day. If you guys like this, we'll do more. If not, maybe I'll just do them for my kids one day. Anyway, take care, guys.